Now that we have cleared everything with our young people getting to go to junior church, we're going to go to the Gospel of John and continue in chapter 1. We're through the prologue now, and we're going to get into the actual story, the narrative that John wants to tell. But as we're kind of picking up and moving ourselves in that direction, I want to put us in kind of a different place, in a different mindset, so that we're thinking the right things as we come into what John has to tell us. Not because we need to have a certain mindset. What John is going to tell us is he's unfolding the story of how Jesus came into the world. That's pretty clear. But so that we, as we're reading that story, can think about, how does this impact me? What does this have to do with me today? I have talked about and been pretty open about our television viewing habits, and that my wife and I have different approaches to watching television, because she likes to watch drama and crime and things, and she wants resolution and stuff like that, and I like cartoons. And it doesn't always mix. There's not very many crime drama cartoons out there, so we have to go back and forth and take turns. But because I've watched these kinds of dramatic crime shows and things, I know when you go to court, one of the things that is part of the process is that a lawyer may prep a witness and help them prepare them for their time on the stand. And John, as we're kind of picking up the narrative, in the prologue, John, as he had been getting ready to tell us, I'm been telling you about the main character and the main point and the main events and all that stuff. The main thing I want to tell you about, when he had been talking about that main point, he had said the main point is that we would believe in Jesus. And part of what was getting him to that main point, he said there was a man named John, and John was a witness to the light. Now, we have sort of discovered as we walk through that the light is Jesus Christ. And so he was talking about John the Baptist had been there as a witness to the light. And that's what we're going to pick up with today. But as we're thinking about John the Baptist, the witness to the light, I want us thinking about the fact that we are also witnesses to the light. Now, we are not prophetic witnesses like John the Baptist is, but we do have a witness. We have a testimony. We have something to share with the world. And if we're going to do that, we should want to do that effectively. We should want to do that well. And so as we're looking at what is going on with John the Baptist, what I want us thinking about is, how do I go through that process of being a witness for Jesus? How do I go through this process of giving my testimony in a way that is effective? What can I learn from John that we can take into this day and we can make it effective? What does an effective witness need? And so that kind of gets us into our theme for this morning as we pick up in John chapter 1. We're going to start at verse 19. And we're going to start with that effective witness. If you want to be an effective witness, the thing you need is persistence. First thing, you need some persistence. Now, this is going to be 3 verses in this passage. We're going to start at verse 19. We're going to end at verse 28. I'm going to pick a verse at the beginning, verse in the middle, verse at the end for this point of persistence. But you're going to see why as we go. What do we need? We need persistence. And in fact, let's start at the bottom of the passage. Let's go to verse 28. We'll come back up. I'm not going to leave everything behind. But verse 28, John is writing about John the Baptist. And he says, these things took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. And so John starts off and he gives a setting for us as readers and for the people he was writing to. He wants you to understand kind of historically where things were kind of set, where they took place. And he says, it's Bethany. Now, to understand everything that's going on with John the Baptist, I want to stop and go back and give just a little background, because some background is really going to help us out here. So let's open up a totally different book, and let's think about Matthew for a second. Matthew is writing a completely different book, he's also writing about the life of Jesus. He's sharing a bunch of stuff, but he does it in his own words. But back in Matthew chapter 3, Matthew had been talking about John the Baptist. And Matthew says this: "In those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." So there is a guy, John the Baptist, and he is out in the wilderness of Judea. He ministers along the Jordan River corridor. I don't know if that's really what they called it back then, but if you look at a map, there's a Sea of Galilee, there's a Dead Sea, and between them, there's this little corridor of river, the Jordan River. And John the Baptist goes up and down this river, and he is preaching a message. And he is preaching, according to Matthew, repent, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom is here. Now that needs some background from the Old Testament. What was going on in the Old Testament is Israel was having their relationship with God. It didn't always go well on Israel's part, and there was all these issues that were where Israel was going off in sin and doing things they shouldn't. And God worked with them through that and eventually sits down with them and says, look, I'm going to make you a promise. And I'm promising to you, as God, I'm promising to Israel, you're going to have a kingdom. I will make sure this kingdom comes. And there's going to be a kingdom, and I'm going to give you a king. When we say Messiah, what we're talking about is not Savior. I mean, the Messiah is our Savior, but the word Messiah or Christ means anointed one. It's the one who you would have over the king, or over the kingdom. It would be your king. And so God is saying to Israel, I'm going to give you a kingdom, I'm going to give you a king. And time goes on. We get to John the Baptist, and John the Baptist is there because it's time. That promise that God has made, God is getting ready to bring it all into fruition. And so John the Baptist goes out and he is giving people this message. Repent, get ready, because this kingdom that God has promised is near to us. And so John the Baptist, he is preparing the nation of Israel for the kingdom. So he goes up and down the Jordan River. Now the Jordan River is not only like it was a big corridor, but there was a convenient path road that went along there because it's a nice place. It's scenic. There's water. I mean, it's just, if you're going to go somewhere and you have to travel, it's nice to travel along something that's pretty while you're going. I much prefer going to, Cedar City or Mesquite than like Mesquite to Las Vegas, because from Mesquite to Las Vegas, there's not a lot happening. But between Mesquite and St. George, or if we go from St. George to Cedar, I mean, there's pretty things to look at. I know I'm usually the driver, so I shouldn't be looking too much, but I still want to see something. And so people would travel up and down the Jordan. That's where John's at. He's going to capture the hearts of these people. He's going to preach to them. He's going to tell them, it's time. The kingdom is coming. And so he goes up and down telling people this message. While he's doing that, he also baptizes people. Now, baptism, we have something in our minds very often of what goes on in baptism, and we tie it so much to our Christian experience that we kind of miss a little bit of historically what was going on. John was not the only person in the Roman world that baptized people. There was all sorts of groups that baptized people. Baptism was a way of identifying with a particular group. When I come into this group, I commit to this group, I'm accepting what this group says, I'm going to identify as this particular group. That group would often have a process of baptism. And so John is doing this, but he says, look, what you need, if you're going to be ready for the kingdom, is you need to repent, because we've been pursuing our own ends. We've been going after our own stuff all this time. We need to change that. We need to stop that, and we need to make ourselves ready for this kingdom. And so he's baptizing people so that they will be ready for the kingdom. Now, they didn't need the baptism to be ready. They needed this repentance to be ready. But when they've repented and then they're identifying with this group of people who's looking forward to the kingdom, they get baptized. Because they're publicly saying, I am a part of this group. I want to be ready for the kingdom when it comes. And so John is going up and down, and he's doing this thing. where he's baptizing people, which represents their dedication and identity with this kingdom principle. And so, since John is doing this, and people are coming to John and they're getting excited because the kingdom is coming, and they're getting excited because they've identified with this group, what happens over time is around John, a little community is forming. A little messianic community, a group of people who are really excited, looking forward to the Messiah. And it's into that group that we kind of fall as we pick up here in John. Now, John says, as we read, these things took place in Bethany across the Jordan. There was a town of Bethany, which is not far from Jerusalem. John, the writer, he wants us to know that's not where we're at. We're at a place on the other side of the Jordan, and he says it was also called Bethany. Now, throughout history, people have looked for this Bethany. We have not found it. We do not know where it is. There was a church father way back when who found a little town named Beth Arba, and he said, well, maybe that's it. And John just didn't know, how to spell. Or something, or it was maybe known by multiple names, which does happen, and so maybe it had a couple of names, and this was Bethany. We have in our studies now, there's kind of a growing idea that there was a Roman province, a district. It wasn't a town, it was a district that was kind of up by the Sea of Galilee. It was called Batanea, and so there's this idea maybe when John is writing Bethany, he was referencing this place because in at least one other place we've read, I think in Josephus, it is called Bethany, this Roman district. And that would fit the setting for where we're at. Bottom line is we don't know. But what we do know is John knows, and he's making it clear it wasn't this Bethany, it's this place across the river, and that's where John the Baptist at this time he was serving. And we could read it and go, why is there so much confusion over this? And it's just because different people, sometimes we say things differently or we make a reference to a place and we don't always make it the same way. And everyone here, I'm sure, has had the same experience I have. If you've ever been watching the news or some sort of national program and they start talking about a state right next to us and they don't say Nevada like anyone from Nevada would say, they say Nevada. And I don't know where that place Nevada is. I know where Nevada is. It's just the pronunciation. And it changes. But John gives us a setting, and he's telling us this is where John the Baptist happened to be at while this was going on, all this stuff was happening. Now, let's look at the present. We have the background. We know what John was doing. Let's look at the present while we're thinking about this issue of persistence. Verse 19, if we go back to the start of this passage, the writer says for us, this is the testimony of John. He had told us John had had a testimony. This is it. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who are you? And then verse 24, now they had been sent from the Pharisees. So leadership, the Jewish leadership, has sent some people to kind of inquire of John the Baptist, who are you? Because you're doing all this work, you're setting up, you're preaching, you've kind of got this community forming. We want to know who you are. And so they come with these questions. And this is where I want us thinking about persistence. It takes persistence. He does it. He gives his testimony, and he gives his testimony, and he gives his testimony. He serves as a witness for Jesus, and he serves as a witness for Jesus. All up and down, he keeps doing it. And if you're going to be an effective witness, that's what you need. You have to keep doing it. You have to just do it. You cannot be an effective witness for Jesus Christ if you do not witness for Jesus Christ. And you have to keep witnessing for Jesus Christ. It's important. And that's what John is doing here, even with opposition. And there's opposition. We can even kind of pick it up here in the text. These people come to ask John, who are you? But they're really being sent by other people, by the Pharisees. If they really wanted to know who John was, they would have gone. But there already is some opposition of stuff going on. A good witness is persistent in their witness. At Bible school, while I was instructing there, one of the classes that I taught was church history, and I love church history. And so it became a common occurrence at the dinner table in our house is we would be eating something for dinner that was delicious and wonderful. And while we're talking, I would say, oh, this reminds me of something from church history. Or one of my kids would be sharing a story, and I'd be like, oh, it's interesting. Let me tell you about something about church history. That reminds me about this and reminds me about that. It got so bad that kids in the town would make fun of me. Not my own kids, and not college students. I had other kids in the town, 12, 14 years of age, going, oh, you're going to tell us something about church history? Yes, I will. Because I'm persistent and I'm excited about it. If you want to be a witness for Jesus Christ, it takes persistence. And it's what John is showing us here. Well, it takes more than persistence. An effective witness also expresses his purpose. So these leaders come, ask John, we want to know, who are you? Let's pick up in verse 20. He confessed, and he did not deny. He confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked him, what then? Are you Elijah? And he said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, no. So they said to him, who are you? We need to know. Now let's kind of pick up or stop there for a moment and just think about the questions going on. So they've come to John. They said, hey, we were sent by the leadership, and we want to know, who are you? That's their question. Who are you? And he says, let me tell you who I'm not. Who are you? I'm not the Christ. He knows that that's really what their primary question is. You're baptizing people. You're preaching about the kingdom. Are you the one who's claiming to be the Christ, that you're going to come and set up this kingdom? And he says, I am not the Christ. Well, that's kind of a head scratcher for them, okay? You're not the Christ. And then they come up with some alternatives. Are you Elijah? And he says, nope, not Elijah either. Try again. Prophet? Not the prophet either. Now, Elijah, the prophet, these identities, they're expectations from the Old Testament. Moses predicted that God was going to bring a prophet in eventually, and in the minor prophets we read about Elijah coming, and there's this expectation here. They're all eschatological. That is, they're like thinking about what's going to happen when the kingdom comes. And that's what these expectations are for. And so they're looking forward to this kind of thing. And they want to know, well, if you're not Christ, if you're not the Christ, are you one of these other persons? We've kind of been looking for and expecting. And John's testimony to them is, no, I'm not. John isn't any of those things. Now, when we look at them, we want to know, well, who is this prophet that's supposed to come? We understand it now. The people at the time didn't, because their revelation was a little more limited. They didn't have the New Testament and all that yet for them. They don't even know about Jesus yet, because that's why they're talking to John the Baptist. But we understand now the Messiah and the prophet are synonymous. Jesus is going to fill those roles. Elijah's a little different, because John says here, I'm not Elijah. But if we were, again, to go look at maybe in Matthew chapter 17, we would see there Jesus is talking to his disciples, and his disciples say, why do they say Elijah has to come? And Jesus says, well, if they would have accepted him, Elijah has come. And he's referencing, Matthew writes, he's talking about John the Baptist. So why would Jesus say that he is, and John the Baptist would say that he's not? And the question is more about what's going on at the times when those people are talking. When these people come up and they're asking John, are you Elijah? They're not asking, are you here in the role of Elijah to fulfill this prophecy where Elijah had been used? Are you the fulfillment of that? What they're asking is, are you Elijah? And John says, no, I'm John. So he's talking about, they're thinking maybe Elijah has been resurrected, and this is him. and this is really Elijah. And John is correcting that. I'm not Elijah. When Jesus is talking in Matthew, he's talking to the disciples, and he's explaining to them that Elijah issue had been a prophetic expectation, that there was going to be someone who came and filled that role. Not that it was actually Elijah, but someone who would come and fill that role. And John the Baptist did fill that role. But in this conversation here, John says, no, I'm none of those people. So we get to an answer. If you're not any of those people, verse 22. So they said to him, who are you? Which is how they started. But now they know it's none of their expectations. So they said, who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? He said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet said. So you're not any of those things. You're persisting. You're doing all this stuff. So who are you? And John gives them an answer. I'm the forerunner. I am the one Isaiah had prophesied. If we go back and we read in Isaiah, Isaiah said there was going to be one who comes before, a forerunner, and he's going to make things ready for the Messiah. That's who I am. I am the one making things ready. That's my job. That's my purpose. As an effective witness, John knows who he is, and he knows what his job is, what his task is. I'm here to make things ready. And that's a task we can understand and we can share in. Because when we are telling people about Jesus Christ, when we are giving our testimonies, when we are serving as witnesses for Jesus Christ, our goal really is to make people ready. I want to make you ready to meet Jesus Christ. Now, it may be if this person I'm speaking to does not know Jesus Christ as their Savior. I want you to be prepared so that when you meet him, you are ready for that and you will meet him. And so I want to tell you about who Jesus Christ is. It's my purpose. And I share that in common with John. It may be that we are talking with people, as I am now, with people who've trusted Jesus Christ. I still want to make you ready. It makes an effective witness to know your purpose. And John knows his. My purpose is not to be the Christ. My purpose is not to be the prophet or Elijah, the resurrected Elijah, any of that. My purpose is to go before the Lord, to make things ready for the Lord. That's his answer. But if we don't know our purpose, we just kind of become ambivalent. An effective witness knows his purpose. Which brings us to this third thing. An effective witness expresses promise. Pick up at verse 25. They asked him, then why are you baptizing? If you are neither the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet. So replay that conversation. They came and they said, who are you? He says, I'm not the Christ. Well, are you this or this or this? I'm none of those things. And they said, okay, then if you're none of those things, who are you? And he said, I'm the forerunner. And so now they go, okay, then why are you baptizing people? What kind of authority do you have? Who are you that you would be baptizing people and doing all this? Because you're none of these really cool people. I mean, they didn't have forerunner in their list. They were like, you didn't even make the list of things we were concerned about. So why are you baptizing people? John gives an answer that sidesteps the question. Now, we could read through the rest of the Gospel of John. We could read through the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and we could read about John the Baptist, and we could maybe come up with an answer. Why was John baptizing people? And in fact, I've already given you the answer. He's making people ready, right? The kingdom is coming. And so he is creating a community where people have committed themselves, have dedicated themselves. They're identifying with this group that's expecting the Messiah. That's why he's doing it. But that's not what he tells them. He said, why are you baptizing people? If you're none of these people, why are you doing this? And his answer is, I baptize with water. But among you stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. So John sidesteps because what he points out to them, what he's talking about with them, is that this is just the metaphor. You're caught up on this baptism and you're missing the bigger picture. I mean, to begin with, if the forerunner is here, if I am the forerunner and I'm the one who's going before the Lord, that should tell you right behind me, like from the picture of history, is the Lord. The Lord is coming. If I'm here getting ready for the Messiah, if this messianic kingdom community is being put together, that should tell you the kingdom is coming. So I'm after something bigger than this issue. Like you're concerned about the baptism. Let me tell you what's really going on. What I am doing, and I think this is what John is communicating as he says this, where he says, I baptize with water. He's communicating with them, what I am doing is just the metaphor. It's just a shadow of what's going to come. The real thing is coming. I'm getting people ready, but I am just baptizing in water. Here we are in the Jordan, and I'm just baptizing people here. But it's just water. But I am telling you that there's one coming who's greater than me. And so John comes to this place of promise. He says this one is coming. And look how he describes this coming one. He says, as he's talking to them, he says, I baptize with water. And then he talks about Jesus. He says, but among you. That is, he's here. We're not going to have to wait a long time. The Messiah is here. And in fact, we're going to find out next week or if you just keep reading in John, you'll find out immediately. Jesus is right there. He's in the community. Now, if we're familiar with the story of Jesus, and we go and we read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we do find out that Jesus was baptized by John. That makes a lot of sense. Right? If John is setting up this kingdom expectation, he's got a community of people who are expecting the kingdom to come, who have identified with this kingdom principle. It makes sense that the Messiah, the one who's going to be king over that kingdom, would identify with this group of people. That seems reasonable to me. I would like presidents of the United States to be a part of the United States, because it's how we function. I don't want to go somewhere else and randomly just elect someone and say, I have no idea who you are, but now you're president of the United States. I want them to know United States things. Well, here's the kingdom. We have a king. We want him to be part of the kingdom things. So Jesus had been baptized by John. And if we go and we read those Gospels, we'll read about that, and we'll read that after that, he had gone off and was tempted. After that temptation, he had come back to the community. Now, John moves up and down the Jordan. If the idea is right, when he talks about, the writer talks about Bethany across the Jordan, he's talking about that district. Maybe he's moved a little further north, whatever it is. Jesus had been out. It's been a month, more than a month since he was baptized. He was out, he had gone through that temptation, and he is traveling back, and now he's kind of in the community of people expecting the kingdom. And so John says, look, and they say, why are you baptizing? He says, look, there's someone coming. He is among you. He means there is a guy here today who is the Messiah. He says he's among you, but he also says that he's not known. Even he who comes after me, he stands, he's among you, but you do not know, because you don't know yet. It hasn't been revealed. It hasn't been shown to you. It's just not someone you know yet, but he's here. You don't know him as the Messiah. Now, certainly some of them probably knew him because, if he's there interacting with the community, whatever, they knew his name. But he's saying you don't know that he's the Messiah at this point. But he's here among us, and he says, the strap I am unworthy to untie. Even his shoelace was too grand a thing, John says, for me. That's how exalted, how wonderful this person is. So when John says to them, look, they said, why do you baptize? He says, look, I'm just baptizing in water. You need to understand the reality is coming. In fact, the reality is here. The opportunity you have is right now. The Messiah is coming. This is his issue of promise. How do we make an effective witness? Well, you have that persistence and you have the purpose. But there's also, if you're going to be an effective witness for Jesus Christ, there's an issue of promise. Jesus has come. If you trust in Jesus, who is the Savior of the world, being very God, took on flesh, died on a cross for your sin and my sin, for the sins of the whole world, was buried after he died on that cross, was resurrected 3 days later so that we would understand the significance of that sacrifice, the acceptance of that sacrifice, so that his life would be our life. If we're going to witness to those things, we have to point to Jesus. And that's a point of promise. Let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you why I am witnessing. It's not just that this is my purpose and I have a goal of communicating Jesus Christ to you. It's because Jesus Christ is the Savior and you have an opportunity to be saved. And this is the promise that we come to share. The real power of an effective witness ultimately is not about the witness. The best thing I have when I witness to someone or when I give you my testimony, the best thing about that is not me. And if we make witnessing about us, I'm really going to be a grand production and I'm going to have all these things, we've missed the point entirely. When my kids were little, one of the programs we watched, the educational programs we watched, was Curious George. And in one of those, Curious George learns about golf. And some of you can appreciate this because you understand the game of golf. I don't play golf, but I've watched Curious George. And in the little television program, Curious George learned that when the goal in golf is not to get a high score, it's to get a low score. And that the lowest score that you score, that's the winner, is the lowest. And I remember watching this with my kid, and I was like, oh, that was a really smart way of explaining golf and why you would want the low score. But then it goes on, and I can remember, I don't remember the exact words, but I can hear the guy's voice and everything. And he says, Curious George thought about it and realized if he never played, he would have the lowest score. I may be the greatest golfer you've ever seen. My score is 0. The greatest witness you could ever be is to never be about you. Now, my witness, my testimony impacts me, and it's going to use me as a character because I would tell you about how I came to know Jesus Christ as my Savior, where I was as a child, and how I heard the gospel from a teacher who was talking to us about heaven that day. And I would communicate those things, but it's not about me, and it's not about the way I tell it or all the good stuff about me. The fact is, my witness is about Jesus Christ. And that's where John goes. They say, well, why are you baptizing? And he says, let me tell you about a person who's here among you, whose sandal strap I'm not even worthy to untie. Because it's not about me. If you're focused on what John the Baptist is doing, John's saying, you're missing the real thing. This is just a metaphor. Jesus is the real thing. That's the promise that John has. And so we go back to our question. What makes John the Baptist so effective as a witness? So effective that this community is gathering around him, so effective that the Jewish leadership is investigating him and wants to know what's going on. What makes him so effective? Well, he is persistent in what he does. He is going through this process of witnessing, and he doesn't give up. He sticks with it. He travels all up and down, and he does the work. He actually gives his witness. That is, he has a purpose. I want to tell people about Jesus. I'm the forerunner, and I'm going to go through that. I'm not just here, of my own accord. I have a purpose that I am working for. And he has promise. The promise of Jesus. He is pointing people to Jesus. And when they ask him and they get directly there, why are you here? He says, redirect. What you need is to see Jesus. And he is out there among you. And he's going to continue to point people to Jesus. We need those same things. That we would persist in telling people about Jesus. That we would have that purpose, that they would know who Jesus is, that we would make people ready to know Jesus, that we would make people ready to meet Jesus, and that it would be about Jesus. Let's pray together. Lord, as we come before you this morning, as we come in prayer, as we come in song, as we come just thinking through your word, we are greatly reminded that truly it is about your Son. It's about Jesus. Lord, this week, many of us will have the opportunity, just in talking with people, to share his name. Lord, make us bold in those moments, that we would persist, that we would give the name of Jesus, that we would share our testimonies, that we would be a witness to the light in the world around us, because this world is so dark. Whether we think on global scales with war